Lon Shaver, president of Silvercorp Metals. We're an established silver producer with a long track record of profitable production, and we just recently closed an exciting acquisition of another Canadian company, Adventus Mining, which has brought us to Ecuador, primarily for the lead project El Domo.
Good to see you.
Did you see him, Matt?
Well, we saw you back in March. In fact, we saw you here last year.
Yes, a year ago.
Like
very different circumstances.
And very different markets, too. Congratulations on the deal. El Domo, we know it quite well. How did you get introduced to them?
Well, we've been in touch with them. We've followed the story for a number of years. And I think the key catalyst that piqued our interest here, and this ties into other things we've looked at and that you've known about, is the fact that Adventus received the permit to build El Domo in January. And so when we met with management for an update in February, learned about the permit and what it allowed them to do, and also their strategy going forward, which could have been a track to get financing, what was more likely leaning towards an M&A outcome. That was the catalyst for us to get in depth in terms of our review.
Okay, well, let's remind people what you picked up there.
Well, sure. I mean, Adventus has been advancing El Domo for a number of years since they entered into that joint venture with the local partner company, Salazar Resources. So they had advanced the project, done a feasibility study in 2021, and as I said, was able to get the permit in January. They had also completed a merger with another explorer developer called Luminex. That brought a second project into the mix that we're also interested in called Condor, which is more of a gold-rich project in the south of Ecuador. Not as advanced, but of interest for sure.
Right, and what do you guys bring to the party?
Well, I think what we bring to the party is a company that's already built 8 mines and 3 processing plants. And when we look at this, yes, it's a new jurisdiction, but we have experience in how to build successful mines and run them profitably. And some of that obviously comes with exposure and access to Chinese manufacturers of equipment and potentially contractors to help get this done on time and on budget.
Right, and let's talk about the jurisdiction. Obviously, it's taken a while for the politics to maybe get out of the way, help.
Yeah.
And you recently met with the president, I believe.
Yes. So politics have been somewhat noisy in recent years in Ecuador. Daniel Noboa is a young guy. I'd say a refreshing point about him, he's a bit of a reluctant politician, not a career politician. And his view is he's taking on this role because his country needs some strong leadership and really to get back to the basics to make it a safe jurisdiction for the population, and also more pro-business to generate more employment to get people's lifestyles up. He's also made it clear as part of his policy and mandate and the other ministries that mining is going to be a significant component of that growth going forward.
Right, so let's look at the people requirement, because I've heard a lot of conversations really about culture, right? You've got the China operations, it's the bread and butter is making you money, you're sitting on a lot of money, new jurisdiction, new people, new culture?
Well, I think we're definitely going to have to adapt and to build up. Adventus had done a great job in terms of advancing the project through the stages in terms of studies and with the permitting and the community, but they weren't, as a developer, geared for that transition to construction. And our group has been through this movie before and has seen this. We've made some key acquisitions in terms of people. There'll be more to be added. But yes, we've got to shift the infrastructure and the organization in Ecuador and the mindset from that study and development to construction and operation.
Right. Now, you've had time to obviously review the contents and enough to be able to make a decision about wanting to acquire El Domo, Adventus' project. What more do you need to do in terms of studies and bringing that certainty to bear?
Yeah, no. I'd say there's not a lot to sort of address the certainty question. It's more just the how and the when. Okay. And there's some minor sort of optimization and tweaks that we're looking at. Right. But none of these things really are expected to detract from that timeline of targeting production second half of 2026 and not deviate from the budget laid out in the feasibility study, which is capex of about $250 million US.
Right.
And we think there could be opportunities in the work that we're doing to trim those numbers back even.
Right. So a lot going on in the marketplace in terms of M&A, but I want to focus on some of the perhaps market failures. A few things have gone wrong. that does mining no good, not a good advertisement for ourselves. You're coming in, you've not been the author of some of the data. So from the point of view of us mine builders in another country, you're going to have to be pretty darn sure about how this thing gets built up. Can you talk about some of the more important things that you've looked at and continue to look at?
Well, I think if you're speaking to some of the, the issues in terms of, structural failures or tailings failures and things like that, those are elements that have to get properly mapped out and done by the right groups who know how to operate in that environment. And there's not a lot of mining in Ecuador, but there are some mines, some significant mines that have been built recently. We're certainly on top of those, looking at how they've done things, what's been successful, and we look to bring best-in-class practices, both in terms of the operations as well as the safety environment.
Right. And you're happy with the consultants that have been used to put information together so far?
I'd say for the most part, yeah. Okay. Yeah, there's probably a few extras that we might not need going forward, and then we might bring a few new groups in that we know and trust based on track record and expertise in a certain area. Okay. But there's not a lot really that we have to look at or think about in terms of big changes.
Right.
And we've already started looking at some of the no-brainer items in terms of looking at road access, installation of a camp, power line. Those were all anticipated, and none of the things that we're thinking about tweaking for optimization have an impact on that. So we're moving ahead with those items, and as we round out the rest of it, we'll be in a position to come back with, okay, here are the sort of the final budget numbers, final time frames to get into those specifics.
So you'll have looked at that in terms of what price you're willing to pay for it, but also in terms of contingencies going forward, and it's still an interesting kind of cost environment right now.
Yeah, well, and on that note, we've been doing work since before the deal closed, and we had, I called it the China shopping trip, where we brought a bunch of the existing team over just to show how we do things at our mines, have meetings with other with equipment manufacturers. Ironically, some of the equipment manufacturers that they met when they were in China were ones that were identified in the plan to supply the equipment. But the plan is, designed by the Western groups, had the equipment being purchased by a reseller.
Right.
And so we're saying, well, wait a minute, this is the same equipment.
Yeah.
Why do we buy it from this offshore reseller with a markup? We have access to go straight to the source and eliminate, in some cases, what's $1 million type markup on a piece of equipment. So we've done that already, looking into those elements, and we have a team now. Some of whom have been down in Ecuador for sort of 2 weeks plus, looking at the projects we've acquired, but also looking at the other mines that are in operation in Ecuador, speaking to them about their experiences, who have they been using, how did it get done, how was the delivery taken care of in terms of execution, and everything that we're seeing leads us to believe that we can get things done on time and on budget, or maybe even better than some of the numbers that have been looked at before. Okay,
so we've talked in the past about mitigating risk in terms of jurisdictional, commodity or metal as well. This seems to do that for you. What else do you think does this do for you?
Well, I think the key thing is we can start to look at, we've added to our inventory, and just looking at, precious metals inventory in terms of, there's an uptick in reserves that we put on the books, resources, M&I inferred, big increase in terms of precious metals on our books as a result of the transaction. But I think the key element here is looking ahead to when we're delivering revenues and cash flows from a new mine in another jurisdiction.
And clearly well received by the market, I think. It's very, very positively received. The kind of catalyst moment for you think is going to be about when you get into production 2026. Anything between now and then that you think people should recognize in terms of that value add?
Well, I think clarity on the schedule, on the time frame, and as we start to tick boxes and demonstrate progress towards that target. But I think the other thing that's important to note is as a group, we're not tools down from an M&A review standpoint.
Okay.
So we're going to be still busy looking at things. Obviously, our priorities are shifted a bit.
Yeah.
We're not necessarily looking for a development project with the same human resource and financial requirements that El Domo is going to call for here in the next 18, 24 months.
For sure.
But we're looking at either backfilling the pipeline further or potentially adding existing production to execute on the strategy we've talked about before, which is to be a multi-mine, multi-jurisdiction platform here.
Right. And getting that balance of the portfolio right is interesting because you're a big producer on one hand, potential somewhere in 2026, the profile of what you go for next. And you've had a few swings of the bat here to try and get this one over the line, right? It's not easy, and we're hearing that all across the board. So there's not everything is as advertised. Some producers are perhaps not quite as people think they are, and you'll get that when you jump into data rooms. Same with the economic studies; they're not all as advertised.
Correct.
So it's a bit of a beauty parade needed, but also a lot of hard work.
Yeah, I think we've shown ourselves to be open-minded, jurisdictionally type of asset commodity, and we remain that way. Going down to Ecuador and moving ahead with El Domo and potentially the Condor Gold project in Ecuador.
Right.
Does it necessarily limit us in terms of the types of things that we'll continue to look at?
Right. And I'm looking at the market, and the big conversation, well, one of the big conversations at the moment is discount chain metals prices and, companies themselves, So on the upside, life looks good. When you say miss the numbers per quarter, you get discounted disproportionately to what actually happened. So how does a company like you take advantage of a market like this? Is it just buildup of capital reserves, or how you allocate that capital?
Well, there's a number of elements to the strategy. Obviously, we have existing mines that are profitable, and with the price of silver moving up, this last quarter that we reported sort of showed the strength of those assets.
Yeah.
We had uptick in our revenues, based on the pricing, and the other important thing is and the key thing, mining investors, great, the price is up, revenues are up. Oh, sorry, the costs were up. In our case, our costs were not up. So that increase in margin, did fall down to the bottom line in terms of earnings and cash flow. So that's an important thing. The other thing that this recent quarter demonstrated was, as it currently stands, we are a silver dominant company with 63% of our realized revenues in the quarter came from silver. So for investors looking at exposure to silver and a company that can deliver operating leverage to higher prices, we're there. So that's what we're doing. We're growing the operations in China as a result of that to deliver that to shareholders. Going forward, well, we've got to be open-minded, as I said, in terms of what other growth opportunities can build our revenues and ultimately our free cash flows.
So you don't describe yourself as necessarily a silver miner or a gold miner.
Well, we are right now.
It's a mine. No, I mean,
we are right now, but we have the latitude going forward, and obviously we have great exposure to silver in our existing assets, including our stake indirectly through New Pacific.
Right.
I'd love to add more silver assets.
Right.
But if profitable operations that grow the company are in gold, as we were prepared to do at Nyanzaga in Tanzania, we'll go there. If it's in a project that's got copper with a precious metals component or byproduct to it, obviously we've demonstrated that both in our attempt in the Philippines and now with our closed deal in Ecuador.
I guess what I'm getting at is you're keeping the options open. You want to position yourselves more as we're a miner. We know how to mine. We know how to produce metal. It just happens to be silver at the moment. But if the right project comes along, you're open to broader.
I'd say precious metals focused.
Okay.
And
not PGMs though.
No. So it would be obviously silver and gold. We've demonstrated that.
Okay.
But if other projects add some
does El Domo have any copper components to it?
Oh yeah, no, it does. Yeah. That'll add in sort of on a full year run rate. It'll add about 85 million in revenue.
Right.
From copper.
Right. And how are you feeling about the silver market? I think the message of industrial metal seems to be getting through now.
It does. It seems to have taken a while when it was sort of obvious to so many of us in the sector before that, but now it seems to be kicking in and people are realizing that.
Right. So let's talk about over here where the conference is. You're stacked with meetings, so we appreciate you making time for us. the types of companies that you're talking, is it meeting shareholders or is there new money there? What are they interested in seeing you do? You get lots of advice from everyone, right?
Well, no, you get a lot of, and there's lots of different groups, and everyone has a bit of a different view on things, and you certainly have the very silver focused people who'd love you to do nothing, but just produce just silver, and that would meet their need in terms of an investment. But we've got to manage the company for the longer term, and I think the feedback so far is positive with us executing on what we stated as our business plan, and that's to be a multi-asset, multi-jurisdictional company. And as you know, it's taken us a few tries to get there, and we're not done. So
well, that's the good news. There's a growth component, not just out of exploration or around the edges.
Oh, well, I mean,
it's more than just around the edges, right?
We have lots of exploration.
Okay.
And but for us to talk about that story sort of takes away from really what the driver is, which is growing revenues and cash flow.
Got it.
So exploration is great, but until you can demonstrate how it's going to contribute to your revenues and cash flows.
Right, and in terms of, and as I say, again, it's trying to understand the management's mentality around management of cash and balance sheet, more importantly. You've done a bit of tidying up around El Domo in terms of some of the partnerships and other groups involved here. So can you sort of explain that and where that's going to come from, why you felt the need to do that?
Well, I think the attraction, and this is really from an Adventus shareholder standpoint, part of the attraction of the deal to take Silvercorp paper was the fact that we come with the embedded financing ready to go. So we have $260 million in cash as of June, continually no debt. So we've got the money to be able to build El Domo with the funding that is set to come from Wheaton. So that's in a good position. That's a good story. Going forward, depending on what we do, obviously we'll have to evaluate that. But we're generating free cash flow now from our operations, and have been for many years. Important note, really, if you think of everything that we've built in China, the only money that's ever gone from Vancouver to China was the initial investment back in 2006 to set things up. Everything else that's grown out of that has been organically driven and has provided the cash to come out of the country and to come back to allow us to do other things, make investments, make acquisitions, build a war chest to go and to grow.
Be efficient, no expensive money, all good.
Well, and that, sorry, yes, that comes back to your question, was the fact with the funding that we have, we didn't need those call it expensive funding sources that were embedded in Adventus for the project. So we cleared a couple of those out.
Fantastic.
On the transaction.
Fantastic. Well, look, I'm super excited for that deal. We've known that deal for a while. We'd like the asset. Now you just got to go and deliver it. So
well,
good luck, Lon.
Appreciate it. Thank
you.
you.
Good luck. Cheers.